Week 12 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I look to sell and trade this week. The first guy, Alejandro Kirk of the Toronto Blue Jays. So Kirk, it's been an amazing season for him, especially at a weak catcher spot in fantasy baseball. And right now, he's ranked 26th overall in the league. On the season, 10 home runs, 31 RBIs, 36 runs scored, a 325 average, and a 414 on base. So right here, Kirk's going out there, and he's putting up huge numbers. And over the last month of the season, where he's really taken off, 9 homers, 22 RBIs, 21 runs scored, a 378 average, and a 474 on base. So these numbers are out of control. There's no way, in my opinion, he's going to keep these things up. Here's Kirk, and he's already surpassed all of the numbers that he had last season, this season. So I know he's getting more of an opportunity over here in Toronto, but he's showing monster power, and he's even batting cleanup in a stacked lineup already. So right now, I think you get a great starting pitcher or even a big hitter at a different position here for Kirk with the numbers he's putting up, because his value's almost doubled with him being a catcher, obviously, which is one of the weakest positions, if not the weakest in fantasy baseball. The last few games here for Kirk: June 21st at the White Sox, 1 for 5, a homer, 2 RBIs. June 22nd at the White Sox, 2 for 5, a homer, 2 RBIs. June 24th at the Brewers, 4 for 4, a homer, 2 RBIs, 2 runs scored. June 25th at the Brewers, 0 for 2. June 26th at Milwaukee, 2 for 4, a homer, 3 RBIs. June 27th versus Boston, 1 for 3 with a run. And then yesterday, he pinched hit in that ball game, 1 for 1. So right now, he's on a tear, hitting 4 home runs in the last week. Here's Kirk, and I just don't see continuing, and I just don't see this guy putting up these monster numbers the remainder of the season, especially hitting way over 300. I just don't see it happening. So right now, while he's probably at peak value, it's a perfect time to sell him high, and I think you could get a decent amount of things deciding which way you want to go, either a pitcher for Kirk or another hitter. I think either way you could get pretty much what you want on your roster in a deal for him. The next guy, Anthony Rizzo of the New York Yankees. So Rizzo, he got off to a great start early in the season, but his numbers overall are still pretty solid. 20 home runs, 50 RBIs, 44 runs scored, 6 stolen bases, a 220 average, and a 333 on base. So Rizzo, he's never been a big batting average guy over the last 4 or 5 seasons. But last season, at least he finished the year with 248. This year, 220. But the power is definitely legit, especially for lefties in Yankee Stadium. But now that he's banged up a little bit as well, I think this is a time to sell off Rizzo. And you could sell him off easily with that 20 home run number just in itself here. So the last couple weeks for Rizzo, 5 homers, 9 RBIs, 8 runs scored in a stolen base, but only a 214 average, but a 389 on base. So Rizzo, he definitely can finish the season with 30, 35 home runs here, especially in that lineup in the short porch in right field in Yankee Stadium. But like I mentioned, I just don't think this guy's going to do much for fantasy owners besides hitting home runs and driving in runs, if that, because only 50 RBIs with 20 home runs ain't great. So the last few games here for Rizzo: June 23rd versus Houston, 0 for 3. June 24th versus Houston, 0 for 2. June 25th versus Houston, 0 for 4. June 26th versus Houston, 0 for 2. June 27th versus Oakland, 1 for 3 with a homer and RBI, 2 runs scored. And June 28th versus Oakland, 0 for 3. So right here, it's not a sell high type of thing here with Rizzo. It's just a guy I would sell in general. And like I said, you got a good starting point if you're a Rizzo owner and want to get rid of him with the 20 home runs already this season. So I think you could get a decent starting pitcher for him in a trade. And if you want to go that route, he's a guy I wouldn't deal off, because obviously you're going to be missing out on homers, but everything else is pretty much nothing of importance you're going to miss from Rizzo. He's mediocre at those other stat lines. The next guy's Javier Baez of the Detroit Tigers. So one of their big offseason signings here. He's been a disaster for the most part, is Baez. But over the last few weeks here, he's heated up at least. And now that he's heating up, if you don't think he's going to continue what he's been doing over the last 2 weeks here, I would sell him off, and you could get something good for him, because Baez does qualify at 2 weak positions in fantasy at second and short. We're playing second base last season with the New York Mets. On the season here for Baez, 7 homers, 25 RBIs, 20 runs scored, 3 stolen bases, a 217 average, and a 257 on base. The surprising thing to me here with Baez is, though, only 59 strikeouts and 235 at-bats. His strikeout rate's usually higher, but all his other numbers are way down across the board. Only a 217 average. He's usually 250, 260s, and the power is way down. Last season, 31 home runs. This year, only 7. So right now, he's gone to Detroit, and he hasn't done nothing. But the last 2 weeks here, he's red hot, 4 home runs, 9 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 7 runs scored, a 341 average, and a 370 on base. So right here, if you don't believe in Baez, that he's going to go back to putting up poor numbers like he has the whole season, this is a perfect time to sell him off. And I think you could get something of decency for him. June 20th at Boston, 2 for 4. June 21st at Boston, 3 for 5, a homer, and RBI, 2 runs scored. June 22nd at Boston, 2 for 3, a homer, and 2 RBIs. June 24th at Arizona, 1 for 4, homer, 4 RBIs. So he had 3 games in a row with homers. June 25th at Arizona, 2 for 4. June 26th at the Diamondbacks, 0 for 4. And the 28th here at the Giants, 1 for 5. So right now, he's been hitting the baseball well as Baez. But I just don't think it's going to be good for him. He don't have a lot of good hitters around him over there in Detroit. And he's a guy who would sell off this week here with his numbers emerging of late. But no doubt about it, he could go on a tear and carry your fantasy team. And I could look wrong here, but I just don't think Baez was a good fit in Detroit this offseason. And he went with the highest bidder. And could you blame him? If a team's throwing $150 million at you, why wouldn't you take it? The next guy, John Birdie, of the Miami Marlins. So John Birdie here, he's been a hot pickup over the last couple weeks in fantasy. And I've mentioned this a lot in videos. If you could go out there, pick a guy up who was uncertain coming into the season and then flip him for a more consistent and better option, why wouldn't you do it? It's on the season here for Birdie, 2 home runs, 14 RBIs, 22 stolen bases already, 27 runs scored, 289 average, and a 380 on base. So he's going to bring you batting average. He's going to bring you on base. And obviously amongst the league leaders in stolen bases as well here is Birdie. And right now he's ranked 73rd in fantasy baseball and owned in 78% of fantasy leagues. But the kicker with him is where he really has good value is second, third, and outfield where he qualifies at. So a very versatile player and a guy here you could trade off for a good starting pitcher. Or if you want to go in an opposite direction and get a power hitter, you could go that way as well. June 22nd versus the Rockies, 1 for 3, 2 runs in RBI. June 23rd versus the Rockies, 2 for 4 with a run and 2 stolen bases. June 24th versus the Mets, 2 for 4 with a run. June 26th versus the Mets, 2 for 4 with a run. June 27th at the Cardinals, 1 for 4 with a stolen base. And June 28th at the Cardinals, 0 for 4. So right here, if you want a table set of Birdie's a good get. But the thing with him is he don't score a lot of runs because this Marlin team, one of the worst offenses in all of Major League Baseball here. But Birdie finds other ways to have good fantasy value. But if I'm a Birdie owner, I would dangle him on the trade block and see what I could get for him. And I think you'll be surprised. A lot of people like stolen bases, and it's definitely a lost art. But if they can win that category each and every week with just adding Birdie to their roster, they might pay a decent price to get him. So right now, if you want to flip Birdie in a deal, I wouldn't blame you because I think that batting average at 290 isn't going to stick. To start with, he don't score many runs with that poor lineup behind him over there in Miami. And he's just a guy I see could tail off. So right now, with some factors in his value, with second, third, and outfield qualifications, that's going to help you try to sell him off this week if you want to. When the fifth and final hit, I look to sell in trades. Travis d'Arnaud of the Atlanta Braves. Said d'Arnaud, he's having a good season here with Atlanta. 11 home runs, 36 RBIs. 32 runs scored, a 274 average, and a 316 on base. So this Brave team, they've been hot in the whole month of June. I believe they've won like 20 out of 25 or something here. And Travis d'Arnaud has been a good factor in helping this Brave team win a lot of games in the month of June. So the last few games here for d'Arnaud, June 19th at the Cubs, 1 for 4, homer, 3 RBIs. June 20th versus the Giants, 1 for 4, a homer and RBI. June 21st versus the Giants, 1 for 5 with a run. June 23rd versus the Giants, 3 for 5, 2 RBIs. June 25th versus the Dodgers, 1 for 3 with a run. June 26th versus the Dodgers, 2 for 5, 2 runs. And June 28th at Philly, 2 for 4, a homer, 2 RBIs. So d'Arnaud, he's found the power stroke over the last few weeks here. And this guy was a former top prospect with the Toronto Blue Jays years back. Then the Mets got him. And in the R.A. Dickey trade, he struggled. And now he's found his home here in Atlanta, and he's been good out of the 3 seasons here is Darno. After last season was an injury-plagued year, but this year he's been healthy, and that's another thing. I don't know if he's going to stay healthy the whole season here, is Darno, to hold him on your roster. So right now, while he's showing good power at a weak catcher position, I would trade Darno because he could get hurt at any time. Contreras is a great catcher behind him who could start stealing playing time as well if Darno starts to struggle. So that's a few hitters I look to sell and trade here for Week 12 of the fantasy baseball season.